Hey, this is Joe with Grow Up Build, and today I'm going to tell you all about smooth blue aster. There are over 180 flowering species in the aster genus, and you are looking at one of them. This happens to be one of the prettier species, commonly known as smooth aster or smooth blue aster. This flower brings in pollinators and can fill a blooming gap in a garden. It really bridges the late summer to early fall flowering period. This is going to be a short profile on this flower. What we're going to cover is what is smooth blue aster and why you ought to grow it, the physical description, identification, growing conditions it prefers, growing from seed, saving seed, wildlife and garden uses, and then we will review. But I hope you stick around, as this flower really gives off some interesting shades of blue to purple color when it's in bloom, and it's really one of the easier flowers to grow from seed. So let's have a look. So smooth blue aster is a herbaceous perennial, so it'll die back to the ground every winter but come back every year. It is native to North America, a huge swath of North America, really. Mostly anything east of the Rockies, it seems like. And it's part of the aster family, so it's going to make beautiful daisy-like flowers. So why should you grow smooth blue aster? Well, the first reason is beauty. This plant is beautiful. There's so many different types of asters about, and while most of them will produce some kind of daisy-like flower, this one gives off hues that are a lot prettier. It's just showier than the common roadside varieties. On top of that, it's got nice looking foliage the whole year. The bluish to gray hues look really nice in the twilight, and they feel very similar to blue false indigo when you touch them. This flower has very long stems also, which can make it good for a bouquet or a cut flower. The next reason is the long bloom duration. My little colony of smooth blue aster will produce color for 4 to 6 weeks. They help fill in any color gaps I may have in the late summer period. They start usually for me in zone 6 in mid to late August, and they'll go roughly for 4 to 6 weeks. And they overlap with New England aster. Not having something blooming means there's no reason for a monarch butterfly to visit, or any other butterfly for that matter. For all the asters that I grow, this one seems to be blooming the earliest. So it just gives you a longer bloom duration of asters in general. Pollinators. So pollinators love asters of all kinds. Anyone who's grown any kind of an aster knows this, and you can see how many butterflies you will attract in bees. If you guys are liking the content I'm producing, please click the thumbs up down below. That really helps my channel out, and I really do appreciate it. Alright, so for physical description and identification. So identifying any aster before it blooms is typically a chore, but there are some unique features to this one that others don't possess. The stem is smooth and round, and it'll be kind of a lightish blue-green color. And there will be a straight stalk for the first half, and then the upper half or upper third of the plant will produce branching, which eventually produces the blooms. But the leaves of this are also a little different in that they are lanceolate or ovate shaped. They're more bluish on the top and green on the underside, with smooth margins, and they're roughly 3 to 6 inches long, with the larger leaves being down below. And they're alternate on the stalk, so one on one side, and the next one will be on the other. For the blooms, these will occur in the upper half of the plant at the branches, and you can expect numerous little clusters of individual flowers. The flowers are going to be about 3/4 of an inch diameter. They're going to be daisy-like and light blue to light purple in color. And they almost seem to change their color as the bloom ages. So it starts out more bluish and ends up being more purple as time goes on. The root system of this plant are shallow and fibrous, making it possible to transplant or divide. It basically is just going to slowly spread via short rhizomes. It's not very aggressive, though. This patch has been here this is year 4, and it's barely expanded at all. In fact, they don't really tolerate taller, more aggressive plants running up against them. So, even though it's rhizomes, don't be afraid. This is what it looks like emerging in the spring. And we're about to go into growing conditions, but before I forget, all the information I'm giving you here is going to be in an article on our website at growupbuild.com, which I will link to below. If you think you're going to try to grow this plant, you should bookmark that site or that article, because you can go for a quick reference rather than sitting through a video. Growing conditions. So smooth blue aster is going to do best in full sun and well-draining soil. It'll reach about 4 feet tall in those conditions. You want to space them around 2 feet apart. It can tolerate partial shade, but the more sun you provide, the more blooms and the taller it will grow. For watering, this plant is pretty drought tolerant. It likes dry to medium moist soil, so not for a rain garden or a swamp, but it's versatile enough in that it can take sandy loam to clay loam or even rocky soil. All right, so to grow this plant from seed. It's very easy to grow from seed. The seed doesn't require any kind of cold stratification or scarification. Basically what I do is I get a pot with some moist potting soil and I'll sprinkle some seed on top, pressing it in, and then I'll put another handful of soil on top, not covering it though. And that kind of gives me a mix of seeds that are buried and unburied. I'll water it with a misting bottle or a pump sprayer, and I'll put it in a location that gets morning sun and afternoon shade. And this is obviously in the spring once temperatures are starting to warm up when I'm doing all of this. I expect to get germination within 2 weeks, and it usually doesn't disappoint me. But some references will tell you to bury aster seeds like half an inch deep. Don't do that. You're probably never going to see the plant. All right, so this is what the seedlings actually look like not long after germination. And then here's a seedling that I actually grew in the pot all year. Okay, to save seed from this plant, it's very easy. Basically, a few weeks to a month after blooming, the flower head's going to turn into a kind of a puffy, like a dandelion, basically. You'll have a seed head form, and each seed will have a little feather attached to it, and then the wind will distribute the seed. But when you see these little fuzzy balls, you can go up there and take the seed heads, put them in a paper bag, let them dry out for another week, and then you can just pinch the seeds out and put them in a baggie. Seed will generally last about 2 years with this. After that, the viability drops a lot. For instance, the seed I germinated for this video last year, it was 3 or 4 years old, and I bet I didn't get 10% germination. Don't plan on saving this seed for a long time. For establishing this, it's probably possible to get it to bloom the first year if you get it in the ground right away. But in general, I would say expect to get your first blooms in year 2. For wildlife, this is a very popular plant with butterflies and bees. It produces both nectar and pollen, and it seems to attract all manner of species. The main bees I see is bumblebees, honeybees, leafcutters, masons, just tons of different species. And for butterflies, whatever's in the area is probably going to visit it if you have enough of this growing. I get a lot of these little clouded sulfurs, skippers, some larger butterflies, migrating monarchs, just whatever's passing through. If you really want to attract the butterflies and bees, though, grow more than one single specimen. Grow 3 or 4 plants. The more plants, the better. Whatever you have space for. Okay, we got to talk about deer and rabbits with this plant. Some references will tell you that mammals occasionally browse the foliage of smooth blue aster. My own personal experience with this particular species is that it is preferred foliage. The first time I ever tried growing this, it was very difficult to say the least. I had to really work to keep ahead of the rabbits. I had to apply liquid fence every week, and then if it rained, I'd have to hit it again. If I didn't do it, the rabbits would usually come mow it down to the ground. I was able to keep the plant alive, and it bloomed the second year, but it was a chore to do it. As a side note, when I was researching this plant, I did find a reference speaking about the nutritional value of the foliage of this relative to mammals. And it noted that younger foliage was more nutritious than older foliage. And I kind of wondered if maybe that's why I had such a hard time that first year, as it's all tender young foliage then. And every time they mow it down, new young tender foliage grows up again. I've observed something similar with other species where once the plant reaches a certain size, it doesn't seem to be eaten as much. So maybe next year I'll try liquid fencing it until it hits, 2 or 3 feet tall, and then we'll see what happens. But who knows? If anyone has any observations on that, or has seen something similar, or has some more information, please let me know. I'd like to hear about it. Okay, for diseases, like many plants, this one can get various leaf diseases like powdery mildew or other fungus. It usually happens when it's very humid, wet, or shady, and the plants are packed too tightly together. So space your plants apart, put them in the sun, and it should reduce the likelihood of that happening. There are fungicides available, but I've never lost a plant to anything like that. When it comes to garden uses, this is a taller plant reaching 2 to 4 feet tall. Its natural home is a meadow, a prairie, a ditch, something like that, but you could definitely use this one in a formal flower bed setting. The key thing would be to make sure it gets exposed to sun on all sides and wind on all sides. And that will allow it to be more vertical and upright. The stalk will be stronger. If you plant them where it gets shaded from one side, like the ones I have are actually mostly shaded from the west, they're going to lean a bit, or arch really. And it's not a big deal for me. They're still 3 feet tall, but if you wanted a more formal flower bed, you'd probably want to make sure it's either in the open, or you could give the plant a haircut. With most asters, you can trim them back by a third to half the height in like early June, a long time before they bloom. And trimming them back is going to make them branch. Making them branch earlier is going to reduce the overall height, and it's going to make less of a torque on the stalk, which makes it less likely to lean over like mine do. So just a little tip maybe. Anyways, let's review. This is a beautiful flower with gorgeous shades of blue to purple color that will bloom for more than a month. It's really a showy display. It's going to grow up to 4 feet tall in well-drained soil, and it needs to be spaced about 2 feet apart. It can grow in a lot of different soil types, from sandy loam to clay loam, and it's one of the earlier blooming asters. So it's very easy to grow from seed and to save seed, and it brings tons of butterflies and bees, and it can really fill a blooming gap. Well, that's about all I have. So if you guys have enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up again. I do have an article with all this information and more at our website, which is linked below. And I'll try to put a link to seeds down there too if I can. And if you guys have any questions, please ask them in the comments. I do like trying to answer them. And you guys all have a good day.